changing something and you don't see it clearly yet, but you hear. And this is where most people would not face Jesus anymore. What most people would do is turn away. What I'm telling you is just as he's physically standing here, knowing what's coming, God's saying, can you physically and spiritually and emotionally be able to stand when getting the vision or receiving it might get nasty? I'm going to say it in a point just like that. Receiving vision from God might get nasty. You mean, God, I just bought, in crazy faith, I just bought my dream car. And now you're going to ask me to sell it back and ride in the hoopty again? Yeah, because the vision I'm about to give you, it might get nasty.
Hey, good afternoon. Delando Dyer from Christ Life TV Ministries, and this is just an impromptu video that we decided to put up in light of some recent events. In this case, seeing a video by Mike Todd regarding the 2022 vision and a very trending topic. In this case, him, I guess if you want to say, demonstrating what Jesus did in Mark chapter 8, verses 22 through 26. In this case, using spit and put it in a person's, well, in this case, he didn't put it in the person's eyes. He just smeared it all over the person's face, which, of course, is nasty in of itself. But going back to that subject matter, let's look at what the scripture says about that, and let's get some biblical insight from that instead of the shock value that tends to come out with his crazy videos. Oh, and if you haven't done so, please hit the like button if you get a chance. It's easy, it's free. Please subscribe to the video if you, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. And also, please share this video with as many people as possible on your Facebook page or other social media accounts. That way, people can know about what to look for as far as being biblically discerning and watching out for these shenanigans that we see in the body of Christ that's now being called ministry. Nevertheless, here we go. Now, in Mark chapter 8, it starts off by talking about the 4,000 that's fed. Actually, to go back before that, Jesus is performing other signs and wonders, aka miracles, and he's taught everything from the Syrophoenician woman, which you can find in Mark 7 verses 24 through 29, specifically, 24 through 30. And then again, in the region of Tyre, starting at verse 31, he healed a man that was deaf, and that also does involve him putting spit on his fingers and putting in the person's ear and telling the person, as far as basically commanding for the hearing to come back, and it was done. Why? Because Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is God. Therefore, what God says can come to pass, and what he does will happen. Now, keep that in mind. Keep in mind all these things that are done. And then starting in Matthew chapter 8, starting in verse 1, a large crowd started to follow, especially after he healed the deaf man. He warned them strictly not to speak about it in the town, but the more he told people not to do so, the more the word spread about the miraculous works that were done, and many people started to follow him. So then starting in Mark, I keep saying Matthew, Mark chapter 8, you have this large following, and they followed him for so many days. So Jesus says, basically, it's like testing the disciples, starting at verse 2. I feel compassion for the people because they have remained with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way, and some of them have come a great distance. And his disciples answered him, where will anyone be able to find enough bread here in this desolate place to satisfy the people? Verse 5, and he was asking them, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7. And he directed the people to sit down on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks and broke them and started giving them to his disciples to serve to them, and they served them to the people. They also had a few small fish, and after he had blessed them, he ordered these to be served as well. And they ate and were satisfied, and they picked up 7 large baskets full of what was left over, the broken pieces. About 4,000 were there, and he sent them away. So now we have a miracle of 4,000 plus being fed with only 7 loaves of fish and a minuscule amount of, 7 loaves of bread and a minuscule amount of fish. Keep that in mind. So God has demonstrated over and over and over, God's Son, the Son of God, Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, has demonstrated his divinity over and over again by performing these marvelous works. Keep that in mind as we go to this next section. Then, in verse 10, and immediately he entered the boat with his disciples and came to the district of Dalmanutha. Verse 11, the Pharisees came out and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. Sighing deeply within his spirit, he said, why does this generation seek for a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. Leaving them, referring to the Pharisees, he again embarked and went away to the other side. Now keep in mind, the Pharisees were very works-based. They believed that in order to be in right standing with God, you had to follow the law. You had to follow all these external laws that they added onto. It was like over 600 laws that they added onto the commandments and the Mosaic law. And that was looked upon as the standard or the level that you had to be on to be in right standing with God. Well, keep in mind, earlier in the Gospels, I believe it's in Matthew 5, he says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus already took shots at the Pharisees and the scribes and had no apologies for it. And he definitely had no apologies by saying that you will not see a sign. And in one case, he did say that the only sign you will see is a sign of the sign of Jonah, where Jonah was in the belly for 3 days and then came out. And of course, that was really alluding to his death, being buried for 3 days and then resurrecting again. So again, the Old Testament being a type or foreshadowing of things that were to come in the future of better things. In this case, Christ, God's Son, dying, being buried, but rising again on the 3rd day, bodily being bodily raised again. But I go back to the passage at hand. Matthew chapter 8, starting at verse 14. And they had forgotten to take bread, and did not have more than 1 loaf in the boat with them. And he was giving orders to them, saying, now check this out, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. They began to discuss with one another the fact that they had no bread. So it went over their heads. They thought Jesus was talking about bread, physical bread. No, he's talking about the doctrine or the teachings of the Pharisees and the teachings or the doctrine of Herod. I said that. Verse 17. And Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why do you discuss the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet see or understand? Do you have a hardened heart? Now, this next verse in verse 18, it comes from Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 21. Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? Do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces you picked up? They said to him, 12. When I broke the 7 of the 4,000, how many large baskets full of broken pieces did you pick up? And they said to him, 7. And he was saying to them, do you not yet understand? Because Jesus is speaking of spiritual things, and they're thinking of physical in this case, or the loaves of bread that they forgot to take or they neglected to take with them. He's trying to get them ready to not be caught up or be deceived by the teachings of the Pharisees or Herod. Now, verse 22, the passage of the hour, if you will, the beginning of the passage. that's so depicted with Mike Todd. And they came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to Jesus and implored him to touch him. Verse 23, taking the blind man by the hand, he brought him out of the village. Very important. And after spitting on his eyes and laying his hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? And he looked up and said, I see men, for I see them like trees, walking around. Then again, he laid his hands on his eyes, and he looked intently, and was restored, and began to see everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, do not even enter the village. More than likely, he did not want him to go into the village, because the last time he healed somebody that was deaf in this case, he told them not to tell people in the village, and they went in there, and basically his Jesus fame spread even more, which of course caused more people to come to him, which of course then after a while he couldn't go places quietly or covertly, for lack of better terms. But what does this have to do with Mike Todd's shenanigans, or his gonzo act of demonstrating the scriptures? Well, first and foremost, was the man that was on stage, what I'm hearing was his one of his brothers, was he blind on that stage? Did God give Mike Todd the ability to perform works and miracles to where he spit on his hands, twice actually, and smeared it all over his face? What glorification for God? How is that glorifying God? Was he blind, or did he have some type of physical ailments that we may not be aware of, that once he spit on his face and smeared his DNA as the Mike Todd's DNA, that something miraculous happened that we don't know about? Or could it be that he just did that because, as if you listen to it, you hear people saying ew or gah, the shock value was there. And of course, he's trending right now as we speak, hence why we're also doing a video on this, because a lot of people may listen to stuff when it's, well, quote unquote, while it's hot. But really, we want to make this message clear to warn people. If somebody has to do gonzo crazy style demonstrations at the pulpit at that, in order to try to get your attention, stay away from this, because it's dealing with sensationalism. Because if at any point he's not talking about the sound teachings that he needs to be teaching as a pastor, something's totally wrong. By the way, right after that verse, this is where Peter, after all the things that him and the other disciples experienced along the journeys with Jesus, this is when Jesus asked the disciples, who do men say that I am? And then who do you say that I am? And Peter confesses that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, the Christ. All those things that were done, the miraculous acts, the feeding of the 7,000 and then the 4,000, and et cetera, the change of water to wine, all these things was to point to Jesus being God. Not shock value, not likes for your video, not to try to get more people into your new vision for 2022, but the fact that Jesus Christ is Lord, period. But on a stranger note, I don't know why it didn't occur to me the first time I saw Mike Todd's little spit act, but there is another movie that kind of demonstrates the same thing Mike Todd did. Maybe you're familiar with this. But until then, take care, God bless. And whatever you do, please do unto the Lord.
I like you. Allow me to display my affection. It is the mucus that binds us.
I'm living that Christ life, that right life, that holy life, a God-fearing life, because I want to have eternal life. See that double life? It's the wrong life. It brings a lot of strife, then you find yourself living that hell life.